Okay, thank you. Good morning. Is Michael Tracy here? Or is he still asleep? Our keynote speaker. So, is he here? No. Okay, well, if not, he sleeps longer than I do. Anyway, so I thought he made a brilliant case yesterday to reduce us back, or to lead us back to the germ theory, and showing that that the virus AIDS hypothesis is not just another example of the germ theory, but that there are huge discrepancies between the very reputable germ theory and the virus AIDS hypothesis and other slow virus theories that have risen at the same time. I thought the idea was so brilliant that I copied it too. So I thought about it too. My original title is down there, and I think they will be joined in some way. I would say it might be really good to go back, look back at the violations or the discrepancies between the HIV hypothesis and the original germ theory, on which it heavily relies, as he pointed out over and over yesterday, so heavily that in a religious way almost. This is the immaculate conception of what it is, and it deserved a lot of its reputation, the germ theory, as I'll outline in a second now. So if I could have my next slide. Seasonal epidemics have decimated mankind from its beginnings. As Gordon Stewart, our RA activist who didn't come yet, or maybe is coming still, has outlined in a review article in The Lancet in 1968, but many others have written about it. Examples are the plague and the flu and the polio and the cholera and the pox and the syphilis epidemics that have decimated mankind off and on over the centuries. All of these epidemics have the following in common. They increase exponentially over several months, that is population-wide, and then decline exponentially, forming the classical bell-shaped curve that were first described by William Farr in England in the last century, or more than 2 centuries ago. That's almost. Examples, if I could quickly forward, and I come to the last points. The first one on record at all is the London plague in 1965. And you see, is the pointer there? Well, no, it's okay. You see, as it rises exponentially, claiming some real lives, 6,000, which was a huge number in those days, and then going down within weeks again, and gone it was. The survivors were resistant, and the epidemic had gone. The next slide shows another classical germ theory epidemic, and this is the well-cited, frequently cited model for our swine flus or bird flus or pigeon flus or whatever, monkey flus, that are hyped by the Centers for Disease Control all over the world. And here's one that really happened. This was in 1918. It presumably claimed more lives in a few months than World War I altogether. They argue, and maybe it's right, I don't trust these numbers totally, but as you can see, it happened in Berlin, in Paris, in London, and in New York, virtually at the same time. It went up for months and declined within several months again. Back to the first slide. Oh wait, there's one more. Here's another classical one. Here are the polio epidemics of the 40s, 50s, and there were some before. Again, the famous bell-shaped curve, expanding or exploding within months and declining within months to be gone and leaving resistant survivors and some deaths as well. So back to the first slide once more, or the second it was, I'm sorry. They have in common that they all rise and decline in bell-shaped curves seasonally. They are spread randomly between the sexes, these epidemics, and the individuals develop these diseases only after short latent periods of several days, typically recover within weeks, and rarely die. So that's the pattern that affected mankind for all these centuries. They were mysterious. The seasonal epidemics of these were suspected to be caused by something that could be transmitted by contacts, contagion as it was called, or germs, others called it, for centuries, but there was no proof, and therefore these epidemics were or remained unexplainable and unpreventable until 1982. 82 was really the beginning of the golden age of the germ theory. At that time, Robert Koch had isolated a specific bacterium from tuberculosis patients, had cloned it, that's the term, I explain in a second, and showed that this cloned stock of bacteria, which he derived from a patient, was causing tuberculosis in guinea pigs. That converted the germ theory from a semi-religious thing to science. From then on, it was microbiology, genetics, and so on. The key to his discovery was the isolation of the bacterium from a plethora of almost harmless, mostly harmless microbes that we constantly carry around with and that we live with and coexist. They parasitize and symbiose with us in various ways, but most of them don't cause fatal diseases. And they did that by cloning them from single cells on agar plates, on gels that feed the bacteria but don't allow them to mix with each other. They grow up from the point where he dropped them on the petri dish. This is an agar gel, a bit like jelly, almost the same as the jelly that you have out there without buns, by the way. They have jelly and forks and knives and water and tea, but no buns. So this is what somebody, if you wiped your shower this morning, I took one actually, and put it on an agar gel, as Robert Koch did, you will see all these beautiful things growing up. For microbiologists, it's beautiful. For some people, it might be a horror. These are fungi, they are bacteria, and there are various variants of each of them in the same dish. And what he did now is all of these came from one single cell. You have to wait a couple of days until it looks that beautiful. Initially, it looks transparent. He grew up all of these in bottles and said, all right, which one is the guy to be blamed for tuberculosis? And 1 out of 100 bottles or reservoir or test tubes contained the infectious agent. From now on, actually, it was possible. The triumphs of the germ theory followed right after this discovery, with the identification of the bacteria of childbed fever, syphilis, cholera, pneumonia, salmonella, influenza. The viruses were found in principle by the same method. Instead of growing up bacteria, you grow cells and infect them with viruses and identify infectious centers. It also led to the scientific basis of it, the discoveries of the laws of microbial and viral replication, how these bugs spread, why they are self-limiting, the infections, and why they really disappear and allow vaccines, which are all violated by HIV-AIDS, as Michael Tracy pointed out, and I'm pointing out again from a more scientific angle. And it, of course, led to the biggest triumphs, or one of the biggest triumphs of them all from a medical point of view, the cures of bacterial diseases with antibiotics and the prevention of the virus with vaccines, the viral epidemics. In the light of the germ theory, the mortality of all infectious diseases combined dropped from over 50% in the days of Robert Koch to about 1% now, and it has been staying there. Never mind SARS, flu, West Nile fever, Ebola, and whatever it is, glaucoma and AIDS epidemics. It's less than 1% chance that any of us here in Oakland or even in Berkeley or somewhere or in San Francisco, even in San Francisco, will die from any infectious disease. It's going to be Alzheimer's or neurological disease or broken legs or arms or heads and heart disease, not hardly any one of infectious diseases. According to our reappraising AIDS activist Gordon Stewart, the germ theory had thus become the most powerful single force in the development of medicine in the past century. And you see it over and over again. All biologists and microbiologists dream of a microbe that causes a disease. They find a vaccine. They're in the textbooks. They have a Porsche. They have dates. And they can pay for houses even in San Francisco. They have made it. They're on coins everywhere. But not if you look for something that is a little more messy. So what are the laws of the germ theory, you'll be asking? The germ theory explains the once mysterious microbial diseases as wars between attacking bacteria or viruses and defending immune systems. Like all wars, speed is critical. From Julius Caesar to Adolf Hitler, initially it pays if you're fast. Later on, it doesn't always help. The microbes must be fast enough to replicate in sufficient numbers to survive before the immune system strikes back. The immune system must be able to overtake microbes in order to save the host, or else the host is gone, and that wouldn't work either in the long time. The following laws govern these wars: the generation times and multiplication rates of the microbes, and the rapid recruitment and clonal expansion of numerous antimicrobial immune cells. And so bacterial under optimal conditions, given a full stomach or a juicy a glass of milk, can replicate, double in 30 minutes. And so the multiplication rate is 2, one cell becomes 2, and the generation time is 30 minutes. So according to this, one bacterium makes 2 in 30 minutes, 4 in 60 minutes, 8 in 90 minutes, and so on, until it reaches what's called a clinical threshold, a number of bacteria that now hurt somewhere or another. So a typical clinical threshold, depending on the tissue or the site of infection, is between 10 to the 8 and 10 to the 10 bacteria. That's a huge number, but remember, we are huge numbers of cells, many even higher. We are 10 to the 14 cells. We can tolerate problems with 10 to the 8 to 10 to the 10 and still hang in there. So a single bacterium can cause a disease after only 15 hours, or 30 bacterial doublings. 15 divided by half an hour, which it takes for a generation time, means 30 generations in 15 hours. So 15 hours in optimal conditions, let's say a full stomach on a beach in Mexico where you drink your first pina colada on the beach with salmonella on it, you don't know it, will now start replicating in your guts. And in about 15 hours, at the latest, it has reached 10 to the 10 bacteria, salmonella bacteria that weren't there before. 1 times 2 to the 15 hours divided by generation is the same as 2 to the 30, and 2 to the 30 is roughly the same as 10 to 10. So this is the formula for diarrhea by a conventional salmonella infection. And there's no way it could be much slower, and there is no way it could be much faster. If it is much slower, the immune system catches it anyway, and there will be an asymptomatic infection, as most of them are. Most of us go to Mexico without Montezuma's revenge. If you come less well prepared and haven't much sleep and eat too much of burritos and too many margaritas, then this one happens. But otherwise, nothing happens. The next one, please. That gives you the laws of viral expansion or replication. Animal viruses, including HIV, replicate in susceptible cells in 6 to 24 hours. That's their generation time. And each infected cell produces about 100 new viruses per cycle, per 24 hours. Thus, HIV is a fast lentivirus, meaning it is just as fast as all other viruses, but it's called a lentivirus or a slow virus because it causes disease 10 years later. But it replicates just as fast as flu, as measles, as mumps, as Rao sarcoma virus, and other retrovirus, or any other animal viruses. They're all in this range. The clinical threshold of disease for the viruses is much like bacteria, 10 to the 9 to 10 to the 12 infected cells, depending on the site of infection, make a disease. Accordingly, let's take a blood-borne virus like HIV is said to be. Let's take mononucleosis virus. It's a herpes type or Epstein-Barr virus. You pick it up by kissing. It's one mechanism. We call it kissing disease. But you can pick it up by other contacts too. I'm sure you could have sex and needles and all such things could also transmit it. But kissing is enough in this case. With HIV, not. Gallo said, I asked him once, when they advertised that kissing could transmit HIV. Viruses could be transmitted by kissing, as they should be. And he said, in a warning in Building 37, I was there for sabbatical. I said, how much? He said, heavy kissing is all right if it's casual, but heavy saliva exchange in kissing is advised against. And that was in the elevator of Building 37. I asked him, could you give some numbers? How much saliva needs to be exchanged to pick up HIV? And he got very furious. He stepped out of the wrong floor, swearing at me that I have only chemistry in the mind instead of understanding love and HIV. But anyway, so I never understood it quite well. Anyway, so what I'm saying is here, an orthodox virus like mononucleosis virus can infect 10 to the 12 cells in 6 days. 100, one infected cell makes 100 by day 1, times 100 by day 2, times 100 by day 3, 4, 5, 6. By day 6, you have 10 to the 12, 6 times 10 to the 2. That's enough. That's about a third of your blood now is infected by mononucleosis virus. And you have the symptoms of chronic fatigue and all these things that come along with this. Except HIV. It doesn't seem to do it that fast. It waits about 5 or 10 years. But flu or herpes or syphilis or Epstein-Barr virus or Rous sarcoma virus causing a tumor in a mouse or other retroviruses causing spleen weight increases, all of them work like conventional viruses. No, only HIV seems to like to wait a lot of time. So the asymptomatic 6-day period prior to the disease is called the latent period. It's typically 5 or 10 days for viruses. See, this is just from Google. I just got it from Google a few days ago. And it shows here all these deadly human viruses. All of them wait about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, 9 days. Some of them a bit faster, some of them a bit shorter. Even the deadly flu viruses. That's what it takes them to build up a critical mass of viruses or virus-infected cells. They all follow the same rules. Those are the rules of the germ theory of viral disease. How does the immune system catch up with viruses and microbes? During a microbial infection, numerous immune cells, I call them I here just to give you a little bit of an equation showing it's not just wishy-washy. It's very clear-cut. You cannot mess around with the laws of the germ theory too much. They're natural constants that are not very flexible. They depend on the generation time of the cell, the ability of making DNAs and RNAs and proteins, and the innate dependence of it on viruses and all that. So they constantly make distinct antiviral antibodies or bacterial antibodies and that are recruited over time. Constantly they recruit more and more, like the immune system typically does. And then it expands those soldiers that fit the enemy selectively. So they go up from one antigen-specific antibody to millions, or well, doubling like bacteria in a sense, but doubling. And it is the only system in the body where in an adult person, a normal cell can clonally expand. The only other one, the consequences are serious. This is like going to war. The other possibility is a cancer cell, and that has very deadly consequences, as you know. So the immune system uses that to recruit a lot of soldiers in a short time, and you can write this roughly formula. The immune systems at n days would be immune cell number 1, 2, 3, 4, all have different angles at the invading antigen in per 2 to the number of days divided by 12. That's 12 hours. That's half a day. So every day, every one of them doubles. But by the time you have hundreds, and on top of it, these guys are not just working with their arms and hands. They have rifles and bullets. They shoot out, many of them, not all of them, the B cells particularly, hundreds of antibodies per day. Every single of those cells can make hundreds of antibodies per day. So within weeks, the multiplicity of distinct immune cells and their ability to make numerous antibodies, antiviral or antibacterial bullets per cell, make up for the initial disadvantage of lower than microbial replication rates. Initially, the blitzkrieg is won by the attackers, by the microbes, replicating faster, but then the immune system catches up. In grown-ups, the immune cells are the only ones, besides cancers, if you happen to have that, with the potential to grow exponentially on demand. So summing up now the laws of the germ theory. Germ theory explains the exponential rise and falls of microbial diseases within weeks and epidemics within months as blitzkriegs between microbes and blitz defenses by the immune system. A little less blitzy than the attack, but in time to save most of us. Initially, the attackers have the advantage of several days or weeks until the immune system is focused on the new enemy. Within these weeks, the host's immune cells typically overcome the invading microbes by clonal expansions of numerous microbe-specific immune cells making hundreds of microbe-specific antibodies each per day. If there is no immune system, however, like in nude mice, that's an experimental system mouse that has, it's a born immunodeficient patient, or in humans with inherited or acquired immune deficient, the host is killed within days after infection. The nude mouse, if it gets infected with any of the common strains of viruses or bacteria, is dead within a few days. And you probably remember in the newspapers about the bubble boy. There was a boy born, often it happens relatively rarely, but it does happen without a thymus. It's without T cells and B cells, and our immune system had to live in with autoclaved food in the bubble chamber. It was actually the son of DeVita, who was the director of the Cancer Institute until recently. And he lived for 12 or 15 years until someday he got contaminated, whatever it was, hamburger, and gone he was, beyond therapy. So this balance between the microbes and the immune system is a classical Darwinian system. By selecting for immunity, the microbes ensure the persistence of their hosts. They keep selecting out people or animals who have an adequate immune system to resist them. If they didn't, we would drop our immune system over time, and the next microbe would eat us all up. But by selecting for good immune systems, they also keep us going, and because they need us for their own replication. Their job is done by the time they have infected a couple of million or trillion cells or billion cells. Those are small numbers in cell business. Then they have made more of their own, and they can infect the next guy. That's their business. And ours is to survive. If this balance is maintained, then they can go and we can go. And that has been going on for millions of years, including our interactions with HIV between monkeys and blacks and whites and homo and hetero and bi and trisexuals and all those. All these Gallo fantasies have been acted out for centuries without causing AIDS until Flossie Wongstall, Bob Gallo, Robin Weiss, and Kalischman observed the situation and interpreted it. So now, by the time the polio epidemics were solved, and the vaccines of Salk and Sabin, the germ theory had explained and brought under control virtually all major human infectious diseases. Not solved them all, but close enough. There was no more microbiological terra incognita left for the microbe hunters to discover and to make careers, new viruses. And they were better equipped than any ever before in the history of mankind. There were thousands of them. They had gone to Harvard, to MIT, to Berkeley, to Stanford. They had lawyers, they had companies, they had everything. But they had no enemies. So here they were like a good army, let's say like the American army. And what are they going to do? They go to Afghanistan or somewhere. Let's bomb somebody. We'll find out later, once we won. Or do something like that. And this was the situation, and is now, even now, with the huge overinflated budgets for AIDS and for the NIH, as long as you confirm. They have tons of money, but they have no real easy targets to work on. So the only thing left for them to hunt for the microbes hunters was now to postulate that slow viruses cause slow diseases, which were previously thought to be non-microbial, namely cancer, leukemia, neurological disease, Alzheimer's, and of course, AIDS. And that became, could I have the next one, please? That of course generated the discrepancies that Tracy yesterday alluded to, and we are seeing all the time. I think Christian Fiala mentioned it, and Lorentzen mentioned it. So the viruses of flow of self-limiting diseases like cancer, not self-limiting diseases like the infectious diseases, they go on no matter what's happening, are incompatible with the germ theory for several reasons. These viruses have several exotic properties in common in terms of the germ theory. The antiviral immunity does not limit or cure slow diseases. All the viruses, the human leukemia viruses, the so-called cervical cancer virus that just got the Nobel Prize, they get lots of Nobel Prizes lately. Carlton Gajdusek got the first for prions And then Pusner got another one for prions, for slow viruses in Kurun, Creutzfeldt-Jakob, and now AIDS got prizes. And so the antibodies against these viruses, like the antibodies against the papilloma virus in cervical cancer, don't help the cervical cancer. The antibodies in AIDS don't help the AIDS patients. On the contrary, they say, now you have the antibodies, you take my pills, and we'll see what happens. So it's actually the opposite the effect. And the viruses of these slow diseases are all neutralized by antibody. They are latent or they are defective. Only fragments of nucleic acids can be detected. In most AIDS patients, you'd be hard-pressed to find a virus. Even then, the world's leading AIDS researcher, Dr. Gallo, had trouble. He got into, he had to defend his case in a court in the end. He had to get the samples from France because he couldn't isolate them himself. So the same is true for isolating papilloma virus from cervical cancer, which is now by Nobel Prize is now the cause of that disease. And the same thing is happening with the leukemia viruses, also from Gallo and from others that are thought, and the hepatitis viruses that are causing liver cancer. All of these viruses are neutralized by antibodies, are undetectable in the slow diseases which they cause. And worst of all, which even Robert Koch would have immediately objected to, the same latent and defective viruses are also found in numerous normal controls. We're not supposed to talk about that too much, but we flaunt 40 million HIV positives in the world, but only a couple of million die from AIDS. So that means 39 million or 38 million doing very well, particularly in Africa, as I come back in a minute. All of these properties are inconsistent with the germ theory. If it were the microbe that is the cause, the antibody would stop it and would cure the disease, and the viruses would be active, working for their replication and killing the host. Since there are no inconsistencies in nature, the slow virus theory must be flawed. The classical test of a theory or the merits are the merits of its predictions. According to the virus AIDS germ theory, the virologists have predicted correctly, as you would expect if you believe in the very reputable germ theory, right after the discovery of the virus in '84. Again, Michael Tracy pointed that out yesterday, that Americans and Europeans would soon be decimated by epidemics of sexually transmitted virus. Only their vaccines could help. And they were dearly paid and worshipped for that. Since this did not happen, no epidemic, and no vaccine either, that should actually, without vaccine, it should have been even worse. But no vaccine came and no epidemic came. They moved forward, as our former president would have said, to Africa, where the epidemics are easier to pass and harder to verify than in the US or in Europe. There you can call somebody, are you really dead? Oh no, I'm still here. But in Africa, it's difficult. They don't have any emails and anything. Bill Gates goes down with condoms and emails all the time, and laptops, but still it's hard to connect. So it's easier to get away with an epidemic there than here. So now, to minimize, there is a claim, well, it did the same virus, as Lauritsen pointed out 10 years ago. How come does the same virus that causes nothing in America and in Europe cause these terrible epidemics in Africa? This is actually logically inconsistent because the humans are the same. At least 30% of Americans are African. How do you say politically correct? African Americans? So I never can remember. Schwarz or black, I used to say. That was okay, but not, I don't know. But anyway, they would be great controls. They're also exposed to HIV. They should get the same epidemics as their nearly identical relatives in Africa. They don't. As long as they stay in the US, they're fine. But if they go to Africa and are studied by Dr. Gallo or Max Essex from Harvard, then they're doomed. And so that's what they say, at least. That's what they publish. They say they're dying, and all the obsequious scientific journals, Nature, Science, the New York Times, the London Times, or Der Spiegel, repeat over and over, Africa is dying. Everybody's dead there. I've seen it from my business class window and took pictures. There's a village deserted all cadavers. HIV was at work. So what they do is they publish now that there are epidemics of mass extinctions of heterosexual people or all of it from HIV. And to make sure that there are not too many objections, those who question it, like Fiala, like Nicholson, sitting here, like Rasnick, sitting there, like Henry Bauer. Is he here already? I haven't seen him yet. Yeah, he's here, Henry Bauer, and of course Duesberg, are immediately intimidated to ask any further questions by calling them mass murderers. And that word is actually in press. It's in Discover magazine last year, and it's a little more subtle. They just say we are responsible for the deaths of 3 million South Africans, 2.5 million from 2005. And they calculate that based on data that are accumulated on the in Geneva, on the beautiful lake of Geneva, in the headquarters of the World Health Organization, 9,000 miles away from South Africa, or else on even better, close to the Charles River at Harvard by Max Essex and a black postdoc called Chiquedera. They have found these epidemics and published them in the Journal of AIDS and said, 3 million we got, or 2.5 million you are responsible for, and Becky is responsible for, and all the names I just gave you. We are essentially mass murderers. And that, if that is not enough, because we have written that up, they move further. They say, okay, you have published that. We call or write to Elsevier, the publisher of the journal where this was published for 2 months. Same thing happened to Marco Ruggeri, you will hear in a minute. They call the publisher and say, we are a risk for global public health. You can see that on Medline right now. That's still there. The rest of the paper has gone. The title is there, and that we are under investigation, the 5 of us, Bauer, and Nicholson, and Rasnick, and Fiala, and Duesberg, for global public health and for libel, based on anonymous charges from the germ theoreticians of HIV. Names are not mentioned. And so I assume by now you think I'm exaggerating and having illusions about the Holy Inquisition still working. Good. Leave. Okay, I'll stop right now. So please watch just the last 3 slides. That shows you just the pictures. Here's that paper. Josh, you didn't do an excellent job. Well, what did you do? I tried to do it. I couldn't do it at all. But you did it. But nice. Could have been better. Anyway, it shows that this paper was out. The only thing that's missing is the pages, and they do this now in the journals. They hype everything ahead of publication. It's ready, it's finished, it's a page proof. The pages are still XX, but it was out for 2 months and then withdrawn on the request of anonymous proponents of the Vatican, of the AIDS research. Yeah. And in this paper, we ask, where is actually the evidence that all these people are dying? And I'll leave you with the answer to this one last question here with the next 2 slides. Here you see we checked. So if there were 3 or 2 million South Africans, not sub-Saharan in this case, dying, which the paper claims between 2000 and 2005, that's in this window here, they would have, and then you would see probably like you did see in the London plague or in the 1918 flu, or in the polio days, you see a loss of people. The population declines. If it's such a bad epidemic, where they said exactly 2.5 million died unnecessarily, because Mbeki and the 5 of us told them, don't use condoms, don't use drugs, go ahead, as he used to for a couple of billion of years, and then they would have died. Now, here, look at this. Here's the population curve of the South African population that you never see in nature or in science. There's no room for such trivia. You know, we look at the virus in some hidden reservoirs of some guys somewhere in the bushes, but that we don't publish. So look at this. You can get it from the US Census Bureau. You can get it from the UN AIDS. You can get it even from the World Health Organization, but you have to work on your computers hard to find it. And here it is. You can get it from South Africa, from the state of South Africa, statistics. They went during the AIDS epidemic, which started in the 80s, from 29 million, is it? No, it's 19, okay? No, 29, to, guess what, 49 million. So this is a huge population explosion. They almost doubled the population during the deadly AIDS epidemic that's propagated by Time magazine, Newsweek, all these wonderful journals, Nature and Science. You never ask, where are actually all the cadavers, or where are all the missing people? What you see is the opposite. And that is a real problem for the country. They cannot keep up feeding them. Here is, by the way, the HIV epidemic, that these heroic HIV researchers coming to the jungle now with their AIDS testing kits, their condoms, and their laptops have recorded. They found that 30% of the Africans are actually dying. They never come back with AIDS, strange enough. And I don't think they're all, I don't know what they do there, but certainly what they never come back with AIDS. The sex tourists also never come back with AIDS, only HIV occasionally. But see, 30% of them are infected, presumably, with HIV in sub-Saharan Africa. If this were a plague, whoops, it should go down roughly to here. A third of them should be gone by now. And it continues to be, there should be hardly anybody left. Maybe Mbeki and a few HIV activists. That would be it. But here, the last slide just shows these numbers, just you can see them here directly from them. There is no there, as Gertrude Stein would have said about Oakland 50 years ago. Thank you. Okay.